So let's talk about what else we can do with our CSS. I like the overall width of the main content area, but I don't like how wide my text is. So what can we do without shortening that div to be able to get this text a little bit less wide, so there's more border around it, so it's a little bit easier to read. We already did put in a padding of 25, and we certainly could continue to do that. So I could go into my heading, and instead I could put a padding of, let's say, like 125. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, that gives us a ton of space. And I don't have to put that padding all around. I could specify just padding of 125 on the left and the right. That is certainly one way that I could do it. Another thing I could do is I could use that width attribute. So I'm just going to get rid of that, undo that, and bring that back down to 25. Not the width for my heading, but the width for my paragraph. So I'm going to write a new rule, and this is called a compound selector, and I did mention these already. It's the idea when you're targeting one tag within another tag. So I am targeting any paragraph tag that is within my div with the ID of heading. Open curly bracket and come down. And I'm going to give this a width of 700 px. Okay, so now that gives me a better width. I like that more. It's not centered, so I do need to copy this or type it in again, my margin left and right auto. And I'm going to put that in there, so now that brings that text to be in the center. So there's my heading, my H1, that's off on its own, and so I would need to do the same thing. I'm going to write another compound selector for my heading H1, and I'm also going to give that the margin left and right auto. But margin left and right auto, if I click over here, you're going to see it didn't do anything. Margin left and right auto only works if you've also given it a width. And so I also need to give this a width. And so I'm just going to give it a width of also 700 px. This is not 700 px, so it really won't make a difference, but I'm giving it the same width as my paragraph. So margins left and right auto only work if that HTML also has a width added to it. All right, so if it doesn't have a width, you have to add a width to it. And let's save this and take a look. Okay, so I like the way that looks more. So I get to keep the overall width of my container. I get to keep the width of the heading. This was important because this has the color, but yet I control the width of the content by targeting those tags that are specifically within this div. Now, why didn't I just write a rule that targeted all of my paragraphs and made all of my paragraphs in the center and 700 pixels? Because this is a paragraph and I want this one to be able to have a little different look. I don't want to target all of my paragraphs. I just wanted to add those attributes to anything that had the P tag or the H1 tag within this area. So that's that compound selector, right? This will not affect the paragraph that's in my footer. But let's do a little bit more. So to this particular CSS rule where we're targeting the paragraph that's within our header, and then we'll write one where we target the paragraph that's within our footer. And the easiest difference we can make here is I'm going to just give a different font size. So I'm going to make this one 14px, for example. Oops, now 2x's again. All right, that one's 14px. And so now I'm going to write a rule, hashtag footer, space P. So this is targeting the P tag that's within my footer. And I'm going to give this one a font size of 11px. All right, so now they can have different sizes. Let's make this one up here, my heading paragraph. Let's make that one 16 actually. So I could continue on if I wanted. I could make them different font families, or they could have any of those attributes that we've talked about, font color, line height, all of those things. They could be treated differently because we're not targeting just the p tag. Before you were just writing a rule that was just for the p tag. Now it's only the p tag that's within certain divs with their IDs. All right. So now let's talk about the images. We really haven't done much for the images. I'm going to write that rule in here. I'm trying to keep my rules connected. So the one that is for the paragraph within the footer, I'm putting that right after the footer one. So I'm going to write hashtag main space img. So if you're an image within the main, and what I want to do for this one is I'm going to give this a little bit of padding all around, and we're going to do that sort of like black border thing. So I'm going to give it padding of 5px, and I'm going to give them a little bit of a margin on the top that's 10px, and I'll do the same for the bottom so that way they're separated on the rows. Margin bottom 10px, and I'm going to give it a background color. So far let's click over here so you can see how they're now separated out, and I don't have to give a background color, but let's just see what that looks like. Back inside of here, background color, and I'm just going to give it black and click over here. All right, so now just to point out, if I took an image and I put it into my footer, it doesn't have any of those attributes, right? It doesn't have the border, it doesn't have the margin, it doesn't have anything, because I was only targeting the images that were within my div with the ID of main. And you remember, if you forget in which div you're in or something like that, you do have these little helpers. You can hover over them, you can click, and then you can go down here. It highlights it in the code, and it also tells you you're working in the div with the ID main. So that could be a little bit helpful. And the same thing is if I added paragraph text inside of this div, it's not going to look like either of these because I haven't written a rule for just the p tag. I would write a rule for the p tag within my main, and then I could style that paragraph as I wanted. All right, so when you are done with this, then just show me what you have, and you're welcome to keep playing if you want, and you could go in and try to add margins in between your divs, margins on the bottom and top if you wanted to see what that looked like separated. You're welcome to try different colors, or just keep adding different attributes and keep mixing it up. But once you're done playing with everything, then show me what you have.